Joining me now is Harvard Law professor and a former brief Democratic candidate for president, Lawrence Lessig. Larry Lessig, welcome back to the show, sir.
Thanks for having me, Chuck.
Let me begin with this. I know you have an announcement today about electors and this idea of freeing the electors to vote their conscience. Many states, in fact, most states bind their electors to that state's popular vote by state law. You claim, I believe, that you have a number of Republican electors that are willing to basically break that state law. Explain.
Well, there are a bunch of groups that are working to advise and support Republican electors who are interested in exercising a constitutional freedom to vote their conscience. That freedom comes from the federal Constitution because, of course, as Justice Jackson said in Ray versus Blair, these are federal officials. And the states could try to restrict them, but as that case makes clear, the framers expected these agents to be able to exercise their independent and nonpartisan judgment about who to vote for.
But in that same Supreme Court case, by the way, that you said, why did they find it constitutional that states could do this?
Well, what the court said in Ray versus Blair was that while the states could not legally force electors to vote one way or another, they were free to create a moral obligation to say that they would pledge to vote one way or another. And I think that's the right rule. They can't be forced by law, but they have an ethical, moral obligation once they take the pledge, and they must vote that way unless there's an overriding moral reason not to vote that way. And the disqualification or the failure of a candidate to live up to the qualifications would be one such reason. And that's exactly the issue that's raised by this election. The Electoral College was made for this election precisely.
So what do you want to see happen? Do you want to see all the Democratic delegates, electors, the Clinton electors get together? I know there was an idea in the Washington Post and say, all 232 pledged to support John Kasich, let's say. 30, if you can find, what do you need at that point? 38 Republican electors to join, come on over. Is that your goal here?
No, our goal is to let the electors exercise their judgment. And what we believe is that at least 37 electors will make the judgment not to support Donald Trump. And if that happens, then of course it goes to the House, and the House has to pick among the top 3 candidates. A week ago, there was one Republican elector who had come out and said that he was not going to vote for Donald Trump. What we believe, surveying the 3 groups that I'm aware of that are advising and supporting Republican electors, is that there's at least 20 right now. Some tell me that the number is higher than that. It should be more like 30, but I feel confident saying there's at least 20. Now, of course, if they don't get to 37, I doubt any of them beyond the one, Chris Supran, who's actually come out in public, is going to vote against Donald Trump. But if the number gets to 40 or around 40, then I think you're going to see a very interesting dynamic as they see there's a reason for them to exercise their the vote of conscience, which I think they are all struggling with right now.
Larry, what about the impact this would have on the democracy? I mean, this would be a group of, they were elected technically, but it's a group of people that weren't on the ballot. All right, they were technically on the ballot, but the voter didn't see their names. And they would decide who's president of the United States. You could have some serious consequences essentially in the streets with this.
No, I agree. It's a very serious, a very, very difficult, serious decision, which is why I don't actually support electors deviating from their moral obligation unless they have an overwhelming reason. But reasons like the threat of foreign involvement in our election, or a candidate who refuses to live up to the foreign bribery clause by disassociating himself or divesting himself from assets that could be affected by foreign governments, raise exactly that reason. Now, we have a system. The system is the Electoral College, which has the right to make a judgment at the end whether to confirm the Democratic result. And what I think would happen here is not that the Electoral College would choose, but that it would go to Congress. And Congress would have to weigh the reasons that raise this issue and make a decision one way or the other.
And you would be perfectly comfortable if the House decided, you know what, Electoral College be darned, we're gonna go ahead and elect Donald Trump anyway.
Absolutely, of course. That's the constitutional rule. The House gets to decide. And of course, the Republicans have a significant advantage in that rule because the
Right.
Constitution says each state gets one vote, and there are many more Republican states than Democratic states. But that's the process, and all we're defending is the constitutional right, which has been pretty well assumed by most who've looked at this question for a long time, of these agents to exercise their judgment.
And very quickly, all these lawsuits about it, last thing as a concept, it strikes me, and you tell me if I'm wrong on this, that you can't really have a federal court rule on this until after the elector breaks the pledge. Is that fair, that you can't prejudge this until the elector actually breaks that state law?
Yeah, well, there's a bunch of cases, some that are trying to get a declaration that the electors are free, some that will come in and defend the elector if, in fact, he wants to vote against the person to whom he's pledged. It is a real problem that this issue has not finally been resolved. The last time, Ray versus Blair, is from the 1950s, when the court raised the question. But I think that we never thought it would be necessary until we had this election. And that's why this is so important, that we take seriously what, in fact, our Constitution says about the right of these electors to be the emergency brake on the process of selecting a president.
Larry Lessig, one thing about this subject is, once again, it reminds people of more parts of the Constitution that perhaps they have not read so closely. Larry Lessig, always a pleasure. Thanks for joining me.